Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel. You're watching TechStrong TV. Today is Friday, May 15th. Hard to believe this is the 35th episode of TechStrong TV, and we are really happy you've joined us. I don't know how many previous episodes you've watched. If this is your first one, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. For those who don't know, we do have a companion Slack channel at techstrongtv.slack.com. And if you go to our techstrong.tv site, you can get an invite to the Slack channel. You can also watch the show as well as on demand of previous shows at techstrong.tv or on digitalanarchist.com, our video platform. Of course, we do stream live every day at 9:30 on Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, sometimes on Twitter Live, YouTube on our Devops TV YouTube channel. We're also available on Devops.com, Container Journal, Security Boulevard. You could watch the show on your mobile device using the Devops.com app, or you could use the Devops.com app on your Roku, Apple TV, or Amazon Fire to watch on demand as well there. Anyway, I want to also mention we're coming up on June 4th, is about 3 weeks out now, and we have a great virtual event as part of what we do here at TechStrong TV, and it's called TechStrong Con. We have an amazing lineup of speakers. Just sending out actually a press release, I know on Monday on this, but we have Andrew Clay Schaefer, Patrick Dubois, Damon Edwards, John Willis from the DevOps world. We have some incredible security folks joining in, a lot of DevSecOps, a lot of cloud native. We have William Hurley talking about quantum computing as one of the keynotes, plenary sessions. I think it's going to be great. So go to techstrongcon.com. You can register. It's free. And in addition to the speakers, there's a full day. It's a 12-hour event, and there's all kinds of activities in addition to the sessions themselves. But anyway, let's talk TechStrong TV for today, Friday. I'm going to send you off on your weekend, I think, with a strong show. We have a couple of good interviews that we recently completed. One, we're going to talk with Damian Skandrovic from NTT Limited. And NTT Limited is 45,000 people strong around the world. I forgot how many, 12 billion or $7 billion in revenue. But included in that is the NTT security team, NTT communications, Dimension data teams, all under this NTT Limited umbrella. And Damien's going to give us a little insight into survey NTT did. Then we have Ankur Sanjia, who's CEO of Volterra, about a new service out from Volterra. You can hear all about that. And then, as we do on almost every show, we're going to go back into our archives and try to give you something that handpicked by myself that I think you'll find interesting. And for this one, I went back to our Predict 2020 virtual event just at the end of January, and it features Charlie Betts of Forrester. And Charlie is Charlie's a pretty well-known analyst in the DevOps space, ITSM as well. And Charlie's going to give us what were his DevOps predictions for 2020 at the end of January. Of course, Charlie couldn't predict a pandemic at that point, or he didn't anyway. But it'll be nice to see, looking back now over 3-4 months, where's Charlie's predictions and what do we see there. I'll be back then with the news. Then we'll hand things over to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon, who has a good interview today with Cumulus Networks, the CEO of Cumulus. And then looks like we'll go over to the Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley. Mitchell has some good analysis and advice there. And then we're going to end today with Working From Home Fitness with Jeremy Jones. This is a popular segment we've been doing 2 or 3 times a week. Our very own Jeremy Jones, who's actually also a personal trainer in his off time, is kind enough to come in and tape a great fitness workout for you guys to follow along at home. And Jeremy's working from home fitness segments are also available standalone on TechStrong.tv and Digital Anarchist if you'd like to do them at your own leisure. But they are really great workouts, especially if you can't get to your gym. You don't need any special equipment. Jeremy uses stuff around the house. Highly, highly recommend it. And anyway, after Jeremy's segment, I'll be back to close things up and send you off on your weekend. So let's take a commercial right now. We'll be right back with our first guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind Devops.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Alrighty, back here in the studio. So as I mentioned, our first interview today is with Damian Skandrovich. Damian's a VP over at NTT Limited, which is the company that was combined or made up of the combination of NTT Communications, NTT Security, the Dimension Data folks, and more. It's about 45,000 people strong, $7+ billion a year in revenue. And Damian gave us a good education on that, as well as some of recent goings on via NTT. So let's go to our interview with Damian right now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this interview. Our guest today is Damian Skandrovich. Damian, I messed it up. I'm going to have you pronounce it for me. But in any event, Damian is here joining us from NTT Limited, and welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thanks very much, Alan. Thanks for having me on, and good to be here.
Absolutely. Let's get things straight first. How do you pronounce your name correctly?
So it's the surname Skandrovich.
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 Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So Damian, I think most people in our audience have heard of NTT, obviously, but why don't you give us a little background on NTT Limited and what you guys do?
Sure, no problem. So NTT is actually, with the foundations of it are Nippon Telephone and Telegraph and Telephone. Sorry, right. Nippon Telegraph and Telephone, based out of Japan. So it's like the AT&T of Japan is probably the easiest way to describe it. The part of the organization that I'm in, NTT Limited, was actually formed in July last year, and it was the bringing together of three parts of the group, which was NTT Communications, which was the more traditional global network business, data center business, and cloud infrastructure business. The Dimension Data business that NTT acquired some years ago, 2010. And also NTT Security. So they were the three core businesses that came together. It now is around 45,000 people and around 12 billion in turnover. So it's a reasonably sizable chunk of the NTT organization.
Sure. I'm actually familiar with a couple of the acquisitions they made to make up, NTT Security. There was some good talent, good companies in there. And Damian, what's your position with NTT Limited?
So I basically, my responsibility, I'm the EVP, the Executive Vice President for Managed Services globally. As we brought these 31 companies together, actually, you mentioned, some of the acquisitions within the group, there was actually 31 separate companies that we brought together under those three larger, group companies. I came from a managed services background within NTT Communications, and I'm now responsible for the managed services within the new organization.
Excellent. Fantastic. All right. Good background. Let's jump into, so you guys recently did a survey in the managed services space. Let's talk a little, before we get into the results of the survey, why don't you lay out for us, Damien, why the survey, what you guys were looking for, who was it put out to, who were the respondents, that kind of thing.
Okay. So we started a survey some time ago, really, focusing on the managed services sector as it's a key part of our strategy moving forward within, the new context of NTT Limited. So we were surveying about 1,200 or so IT decision makers, generally at a C-level IT decision makers. We used some research groups to support us. However, we did include some of other research and data points. As we moved into the COVID-19 situation, it made sense to update some of those parts, and we had some more recent research. As an example, we have a threat report from our security organization, which provided some very good inputs on, very recent data. So a couple of different data points, but the core was based on, 1,200 or so inputs from 29 countries. We focused on around 13 different vertical sectors, including retail, manufacturing, education, healthcare, and the like. So, very, very broad study covering the global market.
Excellent. So that lays out kind of that foundation. Let's now, Damien, if you don't mind, let's jump into what was some of the findings of the survey. I always like to, every survey should have 2 or 3 kind of headlines, if you will. So let's, if we can, we'll start there, and if we have time, we'll dive a little deeper. What are the big findings in your mind?
So there was really 3 core themes, let's say, that came out of the report. The first one was that security is the top priority. That was very loud and clear. Almost 57% of the respondents cited security risks as the key challenge, of managing their internal IT, basically. So that was absolutely a key finding. And obviously, as we've moved into the COVID situation, we've seen a heightened volume of kind of threat actors taking advantage of the situation. So that's only accentuated that scenario, to be quite honest.
Yeah. I wonder if we took it all now, if it would be even higher than 57%.
It's improved, it's accentuating on a day-to-day basis is what we're finding as we're talking to our clients.
Yep.
The second key thing is that, transformation is still very much high up on the agenda. However, that transformation really has moved to focus more on the end user. So as much as that end user transformation was part of the agenda, I think 48% of the leaders that we surveyed acknowledged the need to optimize the workplace environment. However, again, that push, that focus has gone further up the agenda as we've moved into this situation.
So if you don't mind, let's dig into that a little bit. What exactly do you mean by focus on the individual? I mean, so because to me, when we talk about transformation, we're migrating apps to the cloud, moving out of maybe a private server closet or data center into a public cloud or a public data center situation, moving our apps from kind of to like a SaaS-based app delivery model versus a hosted app, if you will. And I guess there's an individual element to that, and then there's an organizational element to that transformation. What exactly do you mean when you say focused on the individual?
Well, I think there's probably 2 things. One, obviously, a lot of people are having to move their working environment to home, to their home environment. So the uptick in collaboration type services, in terms of getting those people up to speed, operating, being able to access systems in the office. I mean, many businesses are already set up for that, but many businesses are just not. So, you know, having to go through that transformation very quickly obviously puts focus on access to collaboration resources, but also it provides a direct requirement from a networking perspective and a securities perspective. Having access to corporate networks, having, you know, the right secure access to those applications that you mentioned, you know, so very quickly, you know, software-defined WAN becomes part of the agenda as well. It's not just getting those end users up and running, but obviously access to the corporate systems and optimizing the way people can work in this new environment.
Sure. You know, Damien, I wonder if what we're going to see is, look, no one had time to adequately plan for this because it came up, you know, quickly. And I think a lot of organizations have done an admirable job of kind of riding that horse midstream, having to jump on the horse or jump on the train mid, you know, as it's moving, and did the best they can to transition from, you know, VPN and on-prem closet, you know, apps versus, you know, collaboration and cloud-based SaaS stuff. But I can't help but think that at some point, whenever the new normal is normal, right, and people have a chance to catch their breath and say, okay, what do we got to do to really kind of re-architect this going forward, right? That there's going to be a second huge migration, transformation away from what people perceived in this, you know, emergency. I mean, they patched it together with spit and bubble gum, right? But you know, going forward, we're going to see just a very different change in architecture, where we can, you know, if people don't want to come back to the office, that's okay too. We're going to be able to support it here, you know. And what does that mean for the managed services sector, you think?
Well, like you say, I think that's almost guaranteed that we're going to see a second wave. Like you say, I think you know, people have just reacted to the situation very quickly, done what they could to pull these things together. But already, as I say, we're seeing this uptick in, okay, we need to professionalize this. We need to make it secure. We need to, you know, make it optimal. We need to think through the opportunities. And to be honest, that really brings us on to the third finding of the report, which was around smart sourcing. And here it's really about collaborating with a smaller number of service providers who are able to cover the majority of your needs. So the message that came out strongly here was, you know, I don't want to work with, you know, hundreds of different players who are specialists in their space. I don't want, you know, lots of distributed contracts and, let's say, one night stands with lots of different providers. I want, you know, some long-term partners who are going to work through this thick and thin to provide the services and solutions that I need. There's an understanding, of course, that, you know, not any provider will be able to cover every area of technology, but at least to be able to, in some cases, front those relationships to ensure that we're, you know, providing the best advice and taking best of breed to those clients as much as possible. So that
absolutely.
That was one of the other findings.
Damien, you've been in the industry a long time. I've been in technology a long time too. And it seems over the years, there's a pendulum that always swings from, you know, going best of breed across the board, which may mean, you know, dozens of vendors, to kind of one throat to choke, right? One go-to partner who provides, you know, 80-90% of what you need. So do you think what we're seeing is just the normal swing of the pendulum back, you know, away from maybe best of breed to, you know, fewer partners, one throat to choke kind of thing? Or do you think this represents sort of a permanent sort of shift away from, you know, minimizing the amount of partners you have?
Understood. Well, I'd love to say I had the crystal ball.
We wouldn't be doing this, you and I, exactly.
Of course, that's exactly what we're doing here. We have the crystal ball. No, but you know, seriously, I think one of the things that, you know, it's very clear that technology is moving so quickly now, so quickly in so many areas, that being able to keep on top of those opportunities for best of breed is almost impossible. You know, things are only getting faster, only getting quicker. So, you know, having a level or a small number of relationships who you can rely on at least to advise and support you, but not necessarily provide all of those services directly, I think is probably a trend that's here to stay.
Yeah. So I call that sort of the trusted advisory role, right? I may not use you for everything, but I may ask you to recommend
Absolutely.
services that we need and providers that we can get it from that maybe you yourself don't do, but we need them as part of our unique needs, structure or what have you. And I think I do think that we deal a lot in DevOps and digital transformation, cloud native. You're right. Technology, it's a great time to be in this space from the technology available point of view. I think it's really hard, unless you're the biggest companies in the world, right? Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies, they have the depth, the talent, the resources to kind of figure out what's best for them and implement it and do it, right? I think Global 2000 and below, right? They need a trusted advisor. They need someone who's kind of their go-to for this stuff. I think the question is, do they want to partner up with a large company like an NTT Limited, for instance, right, with $12 billion and 45,000 employees, and there's a certain, no pun intended, security that comes with that, right? I've got a large trusted partner. Or, there's going to be some segment of the market who says, no, those guys are too big for me. I need someone who's going to give me, really concierge service, if you will, right? Very personalized, maybe locally, geographically, close to me or something like that. But nevertheless, everyone's going to want that trusted advisor, right? Whether, what the profile is.
As you say, I think, there's of course different requirements in local scenario, local language even, regulatory requirements that might drive, regional decisions.
Good. That's an excellent point.
The core point, I think, remains true in all of those situations. People are looking for trusted advisors who can help them on that, journey, because the journey's just getting quicker and more complex. So, complexity is kind of here to stay, I think. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, we try to make it simpler, but I think it's just, the nature of our systems is as they grow, they become more complex, not less. Beyond those big three findings, Damien, anything else interesting in the survey that kind of caught your eye you want to share?
Not specifically, to be honest. I think those were very much the core findings, and there were few areas around the edge in terms of the agenda. On the transformation side, so it's clear security top priority. Cloud obviously up there, as you said at the start, moving the journey towards cloud. Apps maybe being developed directly onto cloud, big part of the agenda as businesses look to pivot and transition and look for new revenue streams as we move out of the COVID situation. So those were some of the other interesting findings. As I say, the agenda still stays on transformation from a senior leadership point of view. It just feels like it's been recalibrated a little bit more based around security and collaboration, end user transformation than the more traditional areas. But nothing's changed so drastically that the rest of the agenda has fallen off the cliff.
No, so I've been in the information security space for 20 years, 18 years. And, I used to joke, I co-founded a company called Still Secure, and we used to joke that every single survey we ever saw done, security was always a top 3 priority. But people's arms were never long enough to reach their pockets, And I'm wondering, how do you think security being such a top priority here manifests itself either in budget or the kind of solutions that people look for as a result?
I guess in a couple of ways. One, we're obviously seeing from a regulatory point of view, lots more pressure on companies and lots, bigger fines at the end of the day. If from a, let's say, a GDPR perspective, or in PCI, credit card compliance and the like, there's a number of different regulatory angles now where businesses will be under significant pressure to to make sure they make those investments, and I think they are seen very much in specific industries, and obviously with the COVID-19 situation, we're again seeing more pressure on some industries and other industries that are taking the opportunity to invest. So I think we almost need to take it one level down and start looking at different vertical markets and industries, because some are still just going to be looking to survive over the even the medium term. If we look at travel, tourism and the likes, that's not going to be something that's going to disappear in the next 12 months, I don't think. Whereas in some industries, already things are looking better and looking to scale up more quickly. So I think that's where we need to start looking at those specific opportunities when we really dig into vertical markets. And again, I think that's where service providers can start adding value once they know vertical markets well, once they know the regulatory scenarios, once they understand what other competitors have been doing in those environments and how they've tackled those problems, understand the business outcomes that those specific companies are looking to achieve. That's where they can really help and add some significant value.
Absolutely. Damien, we're probably over time, actually. I apologize. Hey, I want to thank you for joining with us and sharing the results of this survey. Keep us posted. We'll be watching, obviously, and continued success with NTT Limited.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. That's going to wrap up. I'm sorry, I forgot my name for a second. Alan Schimmel here, TechStrong TV. Thanks for joining us, Damien. We'll be right back with our next guest.
Tech is strong. We may be working from home, but tech goes on. Tech will continue to collaborate. Tech will continue to communicate. Tech is strong. Join us for TechStrong Con, June 4th, 12 hours strong, TechStrong. Featuring John Bacha-Galupe Willis, Shannon Leitz, William Hurley, Jasmine James, Kat Swatell, Cornelia Davis, James Wickett, Courtney Kistler, Damon Edwards. Live Q&A with speakers, exhibit halls, and more. Free, but register before spots fill at techstrongcon.com.
On to our next interview. Our next interview is with Ankur Singler, who's the CEO of Volterra. Ankur has been he's one of these serial entrepreneurs. Had founded a company, sold it to Juniper. Now founded Volterra, I want to say 3 years ago. They're doing some really interesting things. They have a new service available. He's going to tell you all about it. Let's go to our interview with Ankur.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, TechStrong TV. Thanks for joining us for this segment. My guest is Ankur Singler, CEO, founder of Volterra. Ankur, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hey, thank you, Alan. Really excited to be here.
It's our pleasure to have you on, Ankur. Ankur, I don't know how much our audience is familiar with Volterra at this point. So I think a good place to start is give us a background. What's Volterra about? What do you guys do?
So, Volterra helps developers and DevOps teams build and provide a fastest and most secure way to deliver apps across any cloud provider or edge. It doesn't matter where your application is deployed. We'll actually make sure that it's secure and it's fast. And what we have done is we have consolidated multiple services or software stacks that are typically required to operate apps, right? So we remove the overhead of integrating and operating many services, whether you're in one cloud provider multiple cloud providers, or even the edge. And there are two core services. One is Volt Mesh, which is basically a networking and security service. And Volt Stack, it's a set of platform services required to manage infrastructure and apps across cloud or edge.
Right.
So that's the kind of the nutshell overview of the services we provide.
Excellent. How long has the company been in business?
We've been in business almost 3 years now, so coming up soon.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. So, and Ankara, you're the CEO founder. What was your background before Volterra?
So before Volterra, I had founded a company called Contrail, which was acquired by Juniper in 2012. And we basically build mobile networks as well as help really large SaaS providers build their own private cloud and migrate to hybrid cloud as they started adopting AWS and others. So that experience led us to the genesis of Volterra. The experience, especially with companies like AT&T and Workday, and we saw that they were, their struggles were with operations, being able to, deploy multiple sites, multiple cloud locations, and also as they were migrating to companies like SoftLayer, they were doing AWS migration. Some of them were adopting Azure, and it basically became really hard for their platform and operations team to deliver apps irrespective of whichever cloud location or provider they were selecting.
Got it. Now, you guys, I think it was yesterday, announced a new service that kind of really, with this whole COVID-19 thing going on, is meant to help that situation. If you don't mind, if it's okay, can you share with our audience a little bit about what you guys announced?
Sure, it's actually quite exciting. So what happened was we were going through PCI compliance and SOC 2 for our global network. And we realized that as part of this compliance, a lot of the data, whether it's HR data or secrets for our routers, firewalls, servers, and all of that had to be well protected. And most of the time, what the engineers would do is basically they'll send the files or passwords in Slack, making it easy for their team members to collaborate. But as you know, that doesn't pass compliance. So we had to build an internal tool to make sure that we have end-to-end encryption for all our sensitive data, irrespective of what collaboration tool we use. So we had built this pre-COVID-19, and as COVID-19 hit and we all went home and started working from home, we realized that this problem is going to be generic and everybody's going to be facing similar problems. So we said, why don't we actually make our internal tool into a real product that anybody can use to secure their enterprise or their private data, irrespective of what collaboration tool they use, whether it's Slack, email, Dropbox, Box.net, it doesn't matter. It just it delivers end-to-end encryption for any sensitive data.
Excellent. And, God knows we need this kind of stuff right now as with everyone working from home and this whole issue of moving the data around. I did an interview earlier with not with a ransomware provider, a ransomware security company to prevent ransomware.
Yeah.
And, they were talking about the need to have, clean backup, for instance, right? An unattached clean backup. We're hearing stories of companies that are getting encrypted via ransomware end to end, right? Starts on an endpoint, goes into the cloud server, goes into their backup server even. And then, of course, it's a difficult situation. What choices do you have? So
problems are also becoming more real with CCPA. For example, California passed CCPA recently, and it's similar to GDPR if you're sharing sensitive data, whether it's HR data or even with HIPAA. See, a lot of companies are now sharing drug data. How do you actually make sure that the research data, the clinical trial data, all of that is done in a secure way, end to end? If you put it on Dropbox or Box without proper governance controls, there can be real problems.
Absolutely. We're hearing a lot. And I think so our audience is pretty sophisticated, right? There's a lot of cybersecurity developers, DevOps people, cloud native. And so when they hear about things like, encryption in transit versus encryption at rest. They kind of get it, kind of. But I don't know if they really do truly get it. And why is it so important? And, I think a lot of people also, Ankur, say to themselves, well, why can't we just have something that encrypts it in rest and in data and in transit, right? Why can't it just always is encrypted? And, when I hear people say that, I recognize they don't really understand the issues and problems in both of it. But for those of it, folks in our audience maybe who aren't as sophisticated with encryption, Ankur, would you give us a little bit like a ground, a encryption 101, if you will, or what we mean by all of these things?
Yeah, sure. So basically what happens is that encryption in transit is relatively solved problem, in my opinion. I mean, almost every, whether you use Dropbox or Box or, even any other service, they all use TLS. And once you use TLS, client to server communication is usually encrypted using, state-of-the-art technologies like AES-256 or whatever. So from my point of view, that part of the secure transport is well solved or relatively well solved. The second problem comes after you have transported the data. How do you store it in such a way that it's encrypted at rest, right? And that also problem can be solved. But the problem becomes who is allowed to decrypt it, right? Because at the end of the day, storing it encrypted is one side of the problem. But the bigger problem is who is allowed to decrypt it? What is he supposed to do with that file, right? Or that data? That's actually the challenging problem, because the kind of the root cause of the problem is who brings the identity to decide who is allowed to decrypt the data. So for example, if you come to me and say, what, I need access to that box file, how do I know it's actually Alan on the other side, right? So really the biggest problem to be solved in cryptography is the identity problem. And internally we call it the mother of all problems. If you can solve identity problem, I can solve, distributed key management, I can solve, secrets management, any of the data encryption, decryption at rest, data encryption, decryption in motion, all of that can be solved once you can solve the identity problem. And that's what we're talking about here when we say end-to-end encryption, is when you, Alan, send me a file, I know that it was Alan, so that's first thing I can verify. And when I actually am allowed to decrypt the file, I will be verified that it's actually me, right? And that's kind of hard problem to solve when it's machine to machine. It's relatively easier to solve when it's human to human, right? Yeah. So what this Volt Share does is it brings from Volt Stack our machine to machine technology for encryption and identity management to human interaction. And it delivers it irrespective of what collaboration tool you use.
That was excellent, man. Thank you, Ankur. I think that our audience can wrap their heads around that one. Now, this Volt Share, as you call it, you announced it yesterday. How is it offered? What's the price points here? How does one decide? It depends on how many people I share it with. What's the kind of metric there?
Yeah, so the pricing model is actually it's free.
Free. That's a good price.
Yeah, that's a great price. So it's a completely free service, and basically when you can download a Mac or a Windows app or a Linux app onto your device and basically create a policy. So for example, if I want to send a file to Jordan and Alan, I can basically use your email address and Jordan's email address, encrypt the file, and put a policy that says that you can decrypt this file for next 10 days, or even put it on Slack and say that only Alan and Jordan can decrypt it for next 10 days. And I can send.
That's great.
So it's a very simple tool. You download the tool on the other side, register yourself. It's actually part of our Volterra service. Once you register, you're on and you can actually decrypt or encrypt the files and basically proliferate this. Now the way and way we monetize this is providing additional policy controls as well as compliance capabilities for enterprises. So that's the way we actually price it.
Got it. Give me an idea of the kinds of, so it's sort of an open core or freemium model. What are these the premium features for compliance and so forth? What are the kinds of feature sets they have?
So there are four. We put it in four buckets. So it's a part of premium service. So in the premium side, there's four different features that customers get. One is single sign-on. So your entire company can actually use your, Azure Active Directory or G Suite login or Okta as a single sign-on mechanism. So that's the first thing we provide. The second thing we provide is policy overrides. So for example, I can, as an IT administrator, create a policy override that says, whenever Alan or Jordan or Ankur are sharing data, they can never, share it outside the organization, or they can never put encryption, decryption limits beyond 30 days. So the data basically becomes useless after 30 days. So that's an example of policy override. The third one is actually auditing and logging. So you will basically be able to get detailed logs on who encrypted the data, what policies were denied, who decrypted the data, where they were coming from, what IP address they were using, when did they do it. All of that detail will be logged and be made available as part of audit and compliance reasons. And then the last bucket is alerting. So you can actually get Slack alerts. For example, you can set alerts that if anytime decryption fails more than 3 times, send me a Slack alert, or send me an alert on my cell phone. Or if somebody's trying to decrypt the file from Iran, make sure I get an alert. So those are the 4 buckets: SSO, policy overrides, alerting, and logging.
Fantastic. Excellent stuff. All right. And Ankur, this is available on the Volterra website today.
Correct. So you can go to volterra.io, go to products, and then you'll see VoltShare. Just click on VoltShare and you can download it.
Great. We've got a few minutes left. I wanted to talk a little bit about microservices, right? Of course, we are seeing a bit of a microservices revolution, but in 2 parts. I mean, we have all these monolithic applications, and some people attempt to rejig them, using a microservices sort of architecture. And that's a big job, quite frankly, right? To try to convert these monoliths to microservices. I think more importantly is going forward, the amount of people who are just designing applications with a microservices architecture from the get-go. So the green field versus the brown field, right, of it. Talk to me about how Volterra plays in there.
So what we do is, as I said, there are 2 services. One is VoltStack and VoltMesh. So what we do with the VoltStack is, if you're developing legacy applications, monoliths, or you're developing a microservices, using Docker containers or using Kubernetes, we provide a consistent set of platform services, whether it's clustering, scaling, identity management, secrets, all of that, orchestration of the apps. That's all taken care by VoltStack, and it exposes the Kubernetes APIs. So irrespective of whether you're using containers or VMs, or you're deploying it across one Kubernetes cluster or thousands of Kubernetes clusters, or even millions underneath, we abstract that. We let you create logical clouds. So think of them as regions and AZs. You create those across thousands of Kubernetes clusters, which we manage and deploy for you. And you just focus on a business app or your containerized app, and we make sure that it's deployed and it's working. So that's VoltStack. The VoltMesh is basically for all the security and networking services. So whether it's routing, VPNs, load balancing, API gateway, service mesh, app security, all of that is consolidated into VoltMesh, and it's a single data path that actually provides all of those services, irrespective of where you're deploying it. So the idea is this, right? That if you're building, a large-scale app, or even in test dev environments, you don't want to worry about and spend resources on building Kubernetes clusters. Worrying about how do you do, secrets management, key rotation, how do you do, cluster scaling, reliability of the worker nodes, load balancer configuration, the API gateway deployment, all of those things that you do in a single cloud provider, single app cluster, or multiple cloud providers, multiple app clusters, that's all taken care by us. And you can just focus on your business logic.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, with Kubernetes and serverless and stuff, there's no lack of microservices environments that are utilizing microservices. I'm wondering, what do you see as the biggest catalyst, though, not for microservices, but for people to use the Volterra, two different services there?
Correct. So the biggest catalyst from our point of view, or what our customers are kind of happy about, is that they have to worry less about operations and more about their apps, right? And the biggest problem in operations is really the number of people that's required, the amount of things that they have to worry about, the discipline and the security, right? And all the integrations. So, for example, if you're building an app, you have to integrate with Datadog, for example, for certain things. You have to integrate with HashiCorp Vault for your secrets management. You have to do some kind of alerting system with a PagerDuty or whatever. And then you have to integrate with EKS or AKS on the Kubernetes side in the cloud provider. So all of those things are extremely messy and painful. And that is what we kind of take away from the customer so that they can focus on their core business logic and we make their life simpler, right? So that's the feedback we're getting from customers, that we really simplify their operational life, and so that they can go back to focusing on their business app and their logic that is required for the end customer.
Excellent. Excellent. Ankur, we're about out of time. You know what we did, and so I know it's Volterra. It's Volterra.io is the website. So it's VOLTERRA.
That's correct.
Yeah. So Volterra.io for people to get information on all of the encryption service as well as the two services. Hey, I want to thank you for joining us on TechStrong TV. Thank you for putting out this encryption tool. I think it's going to help people working from home who deal with this as a very real world problem, and hopefully it'll catch on.
Thank you very much, Alan, for inviting me, and excited to be here.
All righty. Ankur Singla, CEO, founder of Volterra, here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
All righty. Well, it's that time of the show where we've given you some things new. Now it's something blue or something old. Today's something old is Charlie Betts. Not that Charlie's old, but this interview or this presentation from Charlie is from late January from our Predict 2020 event, and I think you're going to enjoy it. Charlie's giving us his DevOps predictions for 2020. So here's Charlie Betts of Forrester. Take it away, Charlie.
Hey, greetings, everybody. It's an honor to be here at Predict 2020, sharing with you where we see DevOps going in the next year. My name's Charlie Betts. I am a principal analyst with Forrester. I am the global DevOps lead, serving infrastructure and operations professionals. I also cover enterprise service management and a variety of topics having to do with next generation digital operations. So without further ado, let's get into kind of what we see taking shape as the new year looms. The big theme that I've been exploring the past year or so is the move from the older industrial model to the new ways of working. And this is a kind of a famous meme, the fish that doesn't understand that it is living in water. And what is the water that we are surrounded in? We are surrounded in the water of the industrial era. That started even in the 19th century. You know, you had inventors like Thomas Edison. You had the so-called great minds that were creating the new inventions, the new formulas, the new chemicals, the new processes that led to the industrial era and the full operational impact of these new technologies in terms of being able to mobilize vast amounts of capital and materials, transform raw materials into finished goods. You had steam power, electrical power, you had power distribution, you had the emergence of global supply chains, everything operating at massive scale. And how was it that work was understood? How was it that work was described? Work was described and understood and prescribed by the industrial engineers. This here, I believe, is Frederick Taylor himself, the original industrial engineer, the original scientific management advocate, here scrutinizing the work of a technician servicing what appears to be some kind of a boiler, and carefully documenting what will then be the one best way for that model of boiler to always be serviced by all field operations personnel across the country and around the world. And the very strong idea that there would be one best way, one best practice, if you will. And this model created great prosperity around the world, and it became the water in which we swim. But even as early as 1959, 60 years ago, Peter Drucker said, "This too shall pass." We are moving into the age of the knowledge worker. Again, Drucker said this 60 years ago. And what he said has largely held true. We have work that is no longer definable to the same degree of precision that the manual work of the industrial era was definable. We have knowledge work that changes. It is subject to far greater variation. We have knowledge workers who expect, who need, who require much greater levels of autonomy. And of course, we have many of these digital and knowledge workers operating as digital workers, digital practitioners, if you will, because knowledge work did not just mean computers, and computers are not all of knowledge work. It is true, though, I believe, that computers are at the very leading edge of what we mean by knowledge work. And they express it very well because once we figure out how to do something in a repeatable way, we automate it with the computer. And then what's left for the people to do, more variable, more uncertain, more prone to unexpected outcomes. Absolutely all characteristic of knowledge work as the new economic paradigm. The knowledge worker requires autonomy, and I've looked long for just the right graphic. She has her back to you. She is looking off into the unknown. She's well provisioned. She has a sleeping roll. She has water. She has supplies. She is not going to come back home and ask for permission or or come back home and look for directions or come back home because she needs a sandwich. She is going to keep heading off on that voyage of discovery. And this is what we want her to do, because this is the nature of the independent, semi-autonomous product team. And this is one of the major trends we see, is that these product teams will become the primary basis of enterprise operating models. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The diverse, cross-functional, multi-skilled product team is very likely the most important economic unit of the 21st century. And that includes product team thinking applied not only at the level of customer experience, employee experience, but even at the level of infrastructure and operations and the platforms that they are operating and providing as valuable services to the developers who are then developing the customer experience. And on the flip side, project teams and project management offices absolutely already on the decline as we move into this new product-centric world. One of the fundamental points with the product-centric world is that you need to distinguish between type 1 versus type 2 decisions. Jeff Bezos talked about this a year or so ago in one of his famous annual letters to the shareholder. I equate a type 1 decision to jumping out of an airplane. It is not reversible. You need to prepare carefully, otherwise you will have very bad outcome. But too often we treat a type 2 decision like a type 1 decision. A type 2 decision, walking in and out of a revolving door in a public building. This is not a decision that you need to agonize about. It is something that is absolutely immediately reversible if you determine you're in the wrong building. And too often, though, we treat the type 2 decision with all of the rigor and preparation that we would apply to jumping out of an airplane. And this is simply not necessary, not desirable, and it's actually risky behavior, because while you're packing the equivalent of a parachute, somebody else has gone in and out of that door a half a dozen times and developed learnings and insights based on the experiments that that trip through the door represents. All in all, we are heading into a world of increasing complexity and emergence. When I talk about autonomous, semi-autonomous product teams, we start to see as these teams, they implement microservices, they start to behave more like swarms or flocks of birds and less like gigantic assembly lines. They are subject to producing emergent behavior. The same way a flock of birds, this is called a murmuration. It's a formation of starlings. Every starling follows a few simple rules, like don't fly too far off where there are no other birds because you will be eaten by a hawk. On the other hand, don't fly to the very middle of the flock where things are most crowded because it's kind of annoying to fly with all these other birds. And so you want to fly with the birds, but you're looking for that sweet spot where the sky is not too light and not too dark. And with these simple rules, you can watch great videos on YouTube. If you Google starling murmurations, you'll see these immense, beautiful, flowing, fluid shapes that take on different forms, and they can even create a giant bird, such as the formation we see right here. And this is, I think, a great metaphor for the modern digital environment, where you have swarms of microservices that are dynamically recomposable. You absolutely can see that new patterns of usage are emerging. The system is behaving differently today than it did yesterday. And so all of the operational discipline, all of the industrial area thinking that we have, that the assembly line should continue to produce the Model A or whatever that car was, that thinking has to change, because back in the day, the assembly line would not suddenly produce toasters or steam engines. It was going to continue to produce those cars. It was complicated, but it wasn't truly complex in its ability to generate new outcomes and new behavior, surprising new emergent behavior, some of which might be good and some of which might be less good. We'll talk about that. But the whole idea is that this emergence enables a level of agility and velocity that allows us to experiment and thereby create business value. And one of the predictions we've made this year is that, in fact, business value will increasingly be seen as the major metric that organizations choose to measure. There's been a lot of focus on measuring velocity, measuring end-to-end flow, measuring elapsed time from idea to production. You know, how long would it take you to take one line of code from idea to production? Still a very important metric, but at the end of the day, even that metric is only a proxy. It is a proxy for business value. Business value starts with the customer deciding that they like that moment of truth they just had with you, and they would like to have that same experience again, and they will tell their friends about that experience. That is true business value, and we are predicting that that will increasingly be the kind of metric that is favored by DevOps aligned organizations. Let's talk a little bit about some of the major trends we're seeing in terms of the impact of DevOps and product team thinking on the operating model as a whole. The digital operating model, we talk of infrastructure and operations, but oftentimes people lump that all together. They just say I&O, or infrastructure and operations, as if it's one unitary thing, and they will contrast it to development, but there's more to it than that. If I say development, I'm implying a life cycle, and I am implying development versus operate. If I'm saying operate as part of infrastructure and operations, I'm implying development. Same thing if I say infrastructure as part of I&O. Well, infrastructure versus what? Infrastructure versus application. So we have here along the left a minimum viable stack, and along the top we have a minimum viable life cycle, and taken together they give us a 4-box. Now, I'm an analyst. I love our 4 boxes. So, you know, can't blame me for that. But this one I think has explanatory power, because how often have you heard it said, oh, we spend 75% of the IT budget to just keep the lights on. You know, woe is us. We should eat some worms. Well, this is why. Because infrastructure and operations was 3/4 of it. It was the engineering and the operations at the platform level, and also the operations at the application level, and this was contrasted with development at the application level. And so, yeah, I&O was 3/4 of the budget. It makes sense, but things are changing. So, app dev, hey, we've got Terraform, we've got CloudFormation, we know enough infrastructure as code to be dangerous, certainly is encroaching on the traditional prerogatives of the infrastructure engineers. And we hear the stories about the friction every day here at Forrester as people call in seeking advice. Similarly, the cloud providers are more than happy to sell services directly to the app dev team. And so that further reduces the role of the I&O team, maybe to just one of setting up guardrails, or even just, you know, sourcing the right cloud providers, or maybe they're disintermediated completely. Similarly, along the left to right axis up, you see what I did there? It's no longer app dev. It's digital product management. And product teams are moving from their traditional tier 3 responsibilities increasingly into tier 2, because, hey, you build it, you run it. Now, you still need a tier 1, and this is where there's definitely some misunderstandings in the industry that are causing pain. You do not need to do this, don't do this. You still need a tier 1. Now, at tier 1, the product teams don't handle tier 1. They don't handle it well. It's been tried. It doesn't work. If you think it does work, come talk to me. I'm curious to hear your success story. But in general, the organization still needs some overall funnel for capture and triage of the incidents, emerging behaviors that may not be obvious to any one team. So you can't rely on the product teams. This is like a fallacy of local optimization. You still need that overall enterprise perspective, but it can be lighter weight. And so what we're seeing is that we automate with AI ops, we automate with chat ops and chatbots and knowledge management and self-serve. the traditional role of that tier 1 and lower level tier 2 is absolutely also shrinking, to the point where we're seeing digital product management really move from its app dev origins into something that is largely, becoming the majority of the concern. But I do think that the INOL remains. I think we start to see it, maybe flip, maybe be 50-50. One of the predictions, changing gears here a little bit, is that as we move more towards integrated product teams, we start to also understand that we don't just routinely swap people on and off these teams at the drop of a hat. That's not good for the team. It tends to impact psychological safety. These teams are small, complex systems in their own right, and therefore it's not appropriate, to replace Aparna with Leticia or vice versa just because one knows JavaScript, the other one knows Python. We increasingly need to embed the learning and assume that the high-functioning product team is a precious resource. And so how is it that we empower people to learn the new skills that they need as the mission of the product team expands or adapts or pivots over time? And towards that end, we also need to fundamentally re-examine our use and adherence to these traditional frameworks that absolutely all emerged during the industrial era. They all strongly reflect the biases of industrial and Taylorist thinking. There's some progress with some of these. I'll say ITIL is perhaps the most advanced of the four. Beyond that, I won't editorialize other than to say you should be scrutinizing all of these if your operating model is based on them. Because the new governance needs to be much more about how do we adhere or reinforce or espouse principles rather than practices and processes. It's about what are the outcomes we seek versus how are we doing them. It needs to accommodate dynamic and emergent behavior, as we discussed with the imagery of the birds, and it needs to be much more automated, which makes it much more efficient, which also means that the humans are now doing much more value-added work as they participate in the new governance and the new operating model. We're seeing an uptick of interest certainly in flatter and more collaborative organizational models such as holacracy and teal. That's one of our trends that we are seeing. I'm sticking my neck out a little bit, going on a little bit of a limb here with a big shout out to Mark Burgess with promise theory. I think promise theory actually could be the underpinning basis that could bring a lot of this thought together. Because, what is this new principled governance, this new principle-based operating model? It means understanding what you're responsible for, just as we're seeing here with this quote from Zappos. What are the promises you are making to your peers in the rest of the organization, amongst your team of teams? What is it that you're accountable for and promising to do? And this is the basis of self-management. It's not a license for chaos, a license for complete freedom. No, you still are participating and collaborating in very strong ways, very meaningful ways with other participants. But how is it that we start to move from governing the how to governing the what? Stage gates, for example, a classic example of governing the how. And stage-gated governance has to transform, and in many cases, it will go away. This is going to be a process. I just was talking to one of the largest GSIs this morning, and we both agree, that this is going to take years. I mean, folks, this is where you understand you're in it for the long haul if you really want to transform this. Because the stage gating is baked into the policy frameworks. The regulators are insisting on it because it's what they grew up with during the establishment of initial operating models during the industrial era. The auditors are still looking to the regulators. Your managers are still looking to the auditors, and everybody's revolving around, you're going to march through the big gate. And therefore, there you are going to be subject to the inspection of the guards. Well, you don't have to do it this way. You know, stage-gated governance is one way of implementing controls. It is not necessarily the only way of doing that. But it's going to, again, be a historical, very long-running process. I propose that we need to move towards much more dynamic, much more adaptive governance. And in contrast to the image of a gate, I use the image of a steam engine governor. This is a centrifugal governor, and you can tell just by the appearance of the diagram, this is not new technology. This is old tech. They invented it, I don't know, 100 years ago, 150 years ago. As the spindle D spins, those balls move outward. As the balls move outward, they pull down on the scissors mechanism, which toggles lever G, which then toggles actuating arm H, which then throttles it down, and the spindle spins slower. And then the balls sink a little bit. And then the throttle opens a little bit. And so this is a much more dynamic way rather than a static threshold. They had static thresholds too. A safety valve that was designed to blow at 600 psi. That's a static control. But this is a much more dynamic approach. And you may say, well, Charlie, well, what does this have to do with me and digital? Give me some examples. So here's a couple examples. For example, Target Corporation got on stage at Service Management World in Orlando in 2018. I was there, took notes, and said, you know, we're big on change credit rating. They haven't done away, unlike some organizations that have done away with the Change Advisory Board completely. Target hasn't, to my knowledge, completely done away with Change Advisory Board, but they are starting to make it more dynamic in that if you have a history of throwing junk over the wall, you're going to have a low credit rating. On the other hand, if you have a history of releasing good, operable, deployable, stable, observable code with minimal technical debt, you get a high credit rating. You get a free pass. You know, you don't have to have a conversation. You're going to be able to release. But if you're doing the opposite of those things, yeah, it's not necessarily going to be easier. You won't have the fast feedback and that sense of flow, that endorphin rush you get from a successful release. And so I think that this is a much more dynamic way of controlling the inherent risk of change. Similarly, a huge fan of Google Site Reliability Engineering. A lot of people are experimenting with various forms of site reliability engineering. So used to be back in the day that we would wind up with very static governance approaches. And these static governance approaches would result in, okay, we've got a project. The project's going to turn over the project is going to turn over the result of their work to operations, and then they're going to scatter to the four corners of the earth. Well, nowadays with site reliability engineering, you've got different options. If you have a persistent product team and the product is not operable or fit for purpose, you can turn it back. That's really cool. And so if the system's not stable, dev has to take on all of the responsibilities, whereas in some cases you may still have some centralized shared ops services. And of course, there's a lot of variation in the SRE implementations. You have to look at also how your build run strategy is working. But in general, I like this idea that the RACI, the responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed matrix here, itself is dynamic. All in all, what we're saying is that increasingly the complex systems have emergent properties. And this is a quote that I heard. I mean, I've heard this quote before, but for some reason it meant more when I heard it this year. One of these kind of odd cognitive things that, you know, something you've heard for years all of a sudden takes on new richness and meaning. I had that experience this year when Dave got up and said this at ChaosConf. And one of the ways we're seeing this is in a not necessarily good way. The automation, as we automate, as we release more quickly, we're starting to see clear evidence here at Forrester that knowledge is becoming more ephemeral. In fact, Zendesk went on the record in one of our major reports this year that they're seeing the useful lifespan of articles in their clients' knowledge base shrinking. Actually, the knowledge itself is becoming shorter lived. And as we release bugs and as we release software and fix bugs more quickly, we also then have systems of increasing complexity. We have microservices. We have increasingly resilient systems. So what do? We leverage that resiliency to create increasingly complicated and complex systems. And we are seeing at Forrester clear indications in the data that MTTR across the board is going up more than it's going down. And this itself is a very interesting phenomena that we're seeing. So this is one of the reasons that we propose that chaos engineering is going to become a recognized control strategy for digital system resilience. You have to inject failure into the production system because you no longer can mitigate risk by simulating the production system in a pre-production environment. And so this starts to become a top of the house conversation with the chief risk officer and the risk committee at the board level. And these conversations are already happening. Ultimately, I think that site reliability engineering and chaos engineering converge and roll up into this new academic and professional discipline of resilience engineering. I'm a big fan of what's going on here, the combination of academic disciplines like cognitive psychology, ergonomics, human factors, and systems thinking, coupled with safety critical practices, incident management, incident investigations, not coming from digital systems, but the kind of incident analysis that the National Transportation Safety Board has to do in the unhappy event of an airplane crash. Bottom right, you see Janet Napolitano and Rear Admiral Mary Budge, I believe is her name, from the Coast Guard, actually looking at the situation with the Deepwater Horizon, which is the source of the flames back there, that a notorious oil platform explosion in the Gulf of Mexico back in, I believe it was 2010. And you think about, how is it that these things happen? And what can we learn from them? What can we learn from systems that are successfully operating? Very interesting set of questions and innovative new thinking. And some of the smartest people I know in all of digital management are converging in resilience engineering. And so I recommend this highly to you as digital practitioners. Ultimately, I want to leave you with this thought for the day. Operations is product discovery. We no longer can simply say, well, we discover, we research, we have the great minds, the great person in the lab coming up with the inventions, and then it's just a matter of operations. As systems present emergent behavior, the operations actually participates in the discovery of the product. So not just DevOps, but also Ops Dev. And how to close that loop, how to close that feedback loop, I think is very much the challenge that we face in 2020 as we move forward into this increasingly complex digital economy. And with that, I thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak today at this event. And with that, I'm going to draw it to a close. Thanks very much.
All right, everyone. Now it's time for the news. Once again, just giving you some of the highlights over on Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and Devops.com. There's a lot more on there, so please go check that out. But for the news today, up on Security Boulevard, COVID-19 is changing how America works. No joke. Go check that out. It's some interesting insights. Another good article there is Data Classification, Protecting Sacred Data in the Cloud. And I think, we are really seeing a big emphasis on data, not only in security, but in DevOps, Ops, Data Ops as it's called. So that's good to see some kind of the data piece of it catching up to development, application development. Over on Container Journal, we have tightening security with sidecar proxies. Again, cloud native security and this whole Kubernetes stack security is making it happen. We also have LNF adds pass to build CN. I can't even make out what that says. CNIs. And then we also have Snap brings ADC to Kubernetes. So 3 good articles up on Container Journal. Please check those out. And on Devops.com, we have, is your infrastructure ready for edge computing? So I think the whole edge computing thing is going to be, it would have been a really big story towards the end of 2020, I think. I'm not sure what the COVID implication, the COVID situation is going to have on it. But edge computing is something I think you're going to hear more and more about, and it's going to be more and more in play coming up. Vercel picks up $21 million to drive JavaScript platform. It's good to see VC investment still, chugging along. And then we have K6 extends load testing tool reach. More, and going into automated tooling and building testing tools into your CI/CD pipeline. And then an update from our friends at HashiCorp, console service mesh. Just another in the great lineup of HashiCorp tools. So go check that one out. And as I said, these are not that. There's a lot more on Security Boulevard, on Container Journal, on Devops.com. Go check out some of the other new articles there. Check out any of these I've mentioned if of your interest to you. But that's what's news today on Friday, May 15th. All right. With that being said, happy to turn things over to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon. Charlene has a guest today from Cumulus Networks, their CEO, Partho, I think, Mishra, and Charlene will take it away.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at MediaOps, and I am here on TechStrong TV with Partho Mishra, who is the President and Chief Product Officer at Cumulus Networks. Partho, thank you so much for taking a few minutes and talking with me today. Really do appreciate it.
Hey, Charlene, great to be here.
First of all, congratulations on the acquisition by NVIDIA, and good stuff happening over there, huh?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we are fired up. We are excited. NVIDIA is an awesome company, goes without saying, but from an overall product development and strategy standpoint, we think that the combination of Cumulus Networks, software assets, and of course, kind of the overall Mellanox networking portfolio and what NVIDIA has been able to do in the data center, makes for a pretty powerful offering. And, we are very excited. Jensen kind of gave us a very inspirational walkthrough of all of the things that he has in mind for NVIDIA. So we're absolutely jazzed up and, looking to move forward.
Well, that's great. That's great. Well, congratulations again. But aside from that, I did want to talk to you a little bit about how large hyperscale companies are kind of faring in this time of the COVID crisis and the work from home directives. I mean, we we know that these hyperscale companies such as Google and Microsoft, they're always working to make sure that their networks are up and running and working faster and efficient, even in the best of times. But now with the work from home directives in place, it kind of seems like with more people accessing information, there has been a dramatic increase in workloads. And so, I'm just kind of wondering if we're looking at, these companies, maybe they're viewing and not just them, but companies in general, this idea that they need to have faster, more efficient networks. Before that was kind of more of a digital transformation directive, but it was more of this is what you really should do to adopt a business transformation. But now it seems more like this is something you absolutely must do if you're going to survive as an organization. So, do I have that right? I mean, are we kind of seeing a more important emphasis on the networks having to move faster and be more efficient to be able to accommodate this increase in traffic?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'll maybe answer, two related questions, right? Mm-hmm. So the first one is it's absolutely very strategic for everyone now, simply because number one, there was no choice. Everyone suddenly had to start working from home. Mm-hmm. And I would say that, what a lot of enterprises are realizing now is that gosh, we've made the transition. Things are working pretty well. And there's benefits to be had. And especially with all the uncertainty around, how quickly we go back to work, will there be a second wave of infections and so forth? I think there's tremendous importance being provided to, hey, let's make sure that this infrastructure scales and works reliably for us going forward. Mm-hmm. So I would say there's widespread recognition of that, not just in large enterprise IT shops, but I mean, pretty much, all across society, right? But equally, I would say the second question that we asked is, how are the hyperscalers doing? And I would almost extend that question and say, how are we as a networking industry doing, right? I mean, I sit in my neighborhood here, and in my house, there's 4 adults who are working 12 hours a day. And, in my neighborhood, everyone's doing that. And I have to say that, on the whole, there's obviously some work that's had to be done. But I have to say that on the whole, the network infrastructure scaled really well. The access infrastructure, kind of the last mile access from our homes to, however we get onto the internet, to the access on-ramps, and especially the backend, because everyone's hitting the backend services for enterprise applications, but also for, think of Zoom, right? Think of all these, conferencing applications that all of a sudden are seeing, this massive usage. So, from what we see, these services are scaling pretty well. There's had to be some tuning, some rejiggering of, kind of addressing crucial bottlenecks. But on the whole, despite the dramatic increase in traffic, you must have seen some of the public numbers on the traffic on the, the large public cloud networks. I think everything's scaled and handled this upsurge in traffic pretty well.
Yeah, I would agree, because between my job, my husband's job, my son's school, and everything else that's happening just in this household, and then you multiply that by the entire neighborhood, there definitely was the very real possibility of us actually losing our internet connections. But our internet service provider has done an outstanding job keeping us all connected. It hasn't been without its hiccups, I will say, but I do agree that for the most part, the providers have done an outstanding job keeping everybody connected and the information flowing, which kind of begs the question is, how is it that they've been able to do this? Because it seemed like pre-COVID, at least my internet was sometimes spotty at best. And now all of a sudden, with this increase in traffic on the network, everything seems to be working hunky-dory. So what gives there?
Well, let me talk about the hyperscalers first, because I can actually kind of, that's a good question. But I can talk through some of the technology improvements that have happened. So with the hyperscalers in particular, what they have done, and this is not new, I mean, they've been working on this for 10, 15 years, is this idea that, that you can essentially, as a customer of the public cloud, be able to turn up or turn down the services that you get, right? So if you want more, virtual computing instances, you just turn it up. If you want more networking, you just turn it up. If you want more disk space, you just turn it up, right? And I think that those capabilities, those automated provisioning capabilities, are what have really helped here. Because prior to that, if you go back, let's say 15 years in time, and if you look at how service providers provision things, you put an order online, and then it took 3 or 4 weeks to fulfill that order. So the entire fulfillment process was the bottleneck. It might actually take only about an hour to rewire the IT systems to provide that extra capacity. But the entire order processing system would take a month. Now, with public cloud, you can kind of go log in, log into your account, make the necessary changes, and, lo and behold, you have more compute, more networking, and so on. So those building blocks that exist can also be used by whoever is the cloud service provider to be able to quickly add additional capacity for specific services. So to begin with, a lot of them are over dimensioned, and they have, plenty of capacity, but they've over the years added the ability to quickly steer traffic, to be able to, kind of move applications around. if you think about, kind of what's happened with containers, essentially the idea is that your application workload can run anywhere, and it can be dynamically moved around. So I think that that's kind of been the thing that's been the most helpful, because the best way to think about it is that data centers have no boundaries. Workloads can flow between data centers, and between the automated provisioning and these elastic applications, the ability to move them around. I think that's really been the key to the success. And of course, I'm sure there's a lot of very stressed out operations people behind the scenes, kind of monitoring bottlenecks and trying to make sure that everything stays on track.
So we're talking about this network provisioning and being able to kind of move data and move apps around, move information around. What part or what role, if you will, does IT automation play in this whole scenario?
Well, IT automation is very central in this, and the way I would describe it is that the public cloud guys started to, develop some of this technology. And when I say public cloud guys, let me be specific. Let's say Google. They started to develop this, and because they didn't have any infrastructure, they kind of, solved the problem in the right way and, kind of automated all these steps. But if you look at, traditional enterprise IT, a lot of the workflows in, many enterprise IT teams are still, I wouldn't call it manual, but certainly it's a workflow which is sometimes kind of based on like a trouble ticket flow. For example, if I run the network team and you happen to run the applications team, and you need to fire up a new application, you will file a trouble ticket asking me to, let's say, open up certain firewall ports or to rejigger some of the VLAN settings. And I then kind of go off and do it. And then, I kind of provide the information in the trouble ticket. And once that's done, you, the application czar, can, fire up your application. Now, there's nothing in the process that I just described which cannot be automated, except that what it requires is to understand that workflow, each one of the steps there, and to be able to write code, which essentially makes the calls to certain network elements or certain storage elements or certain firewall elements or compute elements to have them do the right thing. So what I would say is what you're seeing is over the last 4 or 5 years, through the work that companies like Cumulus have been doing, that capability which only existed in the public cloud, organizations which had 20,000 software engineers writing highly sophisticated code to orchestrate all of their stuff. Well, guess what? We've kind of made it available to the masses. So in a way, that's what's been happening. And to be fair to enterprise IT teams, they're very capable. They are, they have top-notch people. They just don't have as many developers. They might have 5 people running the network IT team and 5 people running servers. And so they don't have the bandwidth. And so what they're looking for is tools and technologies that are more, let's call it shrink wrap, that they can then, easily customize to their needs.
All right, that makes sense. So do you think that because of what we've seen over the last 8 weeks or so, and this increase in demand for for bandwidth and for speed and reliability in our connections, especially as we're kind of moving, seems like, toward a semi-permanent, if not permanent, work from home strategy. Do you think we're going to be seeing even maybe faster transformational efforts by these hyperscalers and even enterprise companies to transform their networks to be even faster and more reliable and offer the reliability that a work from home workforce needs?
Yeah, I think so. So let me kind of, dissect that down into kind of, what's required.
Sure.
So the first part of it is that because people are working from home, this traditional workflow that I described with trouble tickets and logging into systems and so forth, right? I mean, inherently, that's a little more clunky because, when you're in the office, you're essentially sitting within the same virtual LAN or VPN domain. The security access is all kind of, relatively easy. So getting things done through a manual provisioning flow is painful, but it's kind of easier. If you're sitting at home and you first have to fire up your VPN, and then you have to go through additional authentication checks just to be able to get into each one of the domains in your company, it's kind of a clumsy process, right? And so I think that the things that we were talking about in terms of more automation of the provisioning flows and so on, I think that becomes more important. So I think you will see more pressure on that. It's a natural kind of human thing, right? If they are struggling to get something done when they're remote, they'll try to make the process more efficient. So I think this whole aspect of remote provisioning, remote troubleshooting, I think you'll see that get a kick in the pants. The second thing is, like you said, it's absolutely incumbent that the network be completely reliable, available all the time, available to scale dynamically to handle all the bandwidth needs. But I think also there are certain types of applications, for example, virtual desktops, and the ability to host them and to scale them and to be able to kind of we talked of containers earlier, to be able to match the application demand to the compute capacity. I think that's a crucial capability, because again, let's take a really simple example, right? Enterprise conferencing applications like a Zoom, like a Cisco WebEx, like a Skype. Essentially what's happening is that, I'll give an example. Our company's all hands meeting. In our company's all hands meeting, we typically do it in Mountain View, and there's like 50 of us in person and various people joining in from various other facilities. Well, the first time we tried to do it virtually with like 200 people, it crawled. And just it's simple stuff. I mean, the underlying technology that's kind of making it difficult is because you're having to mix 200 audio streams and composite all the video frames and so on. But it's really a computing problem. If there was computing capacity, the algorithms, the software is all there, right? And so what you see is, even with these applications, people have furiously worked behind the scenes to be able to solve those problems in the back end in terms of how they're hosted, simply because now these services are mission critical, right? Not just for the enterprise IT team, but for a much broader application.
It's definitely a lot to think about. It's I think that we're going to see some serious changes in the way networks are regarded among organizations as we move forward in this new paradigm, if you will. But Partha, thank you so much for walking me through this. I think we're probably going to end up having another conversation about this sometime in the future.
Yeah, looking forward to it. My pleasure, Charlene.
All right, great. Well, thanks again for joining me. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Elsa, you're all over the place.
How am I supposed to do anything when she's over here just doing her own thing?
Okay, well, maybe if Dan played more than just one string, we'd all be more on the same page.
Are you out of your mind? Okay, I do the E string. That's my job.
Isn't there an easier way to do this? There has to be.
I literally just suggested something. Nobody ever listens to me, though, so...
ridiculous every time.
When your team's not on the same page, things can get weird, fast. Don't make your DevOps team live like this.
El tutto tu tempo es finito, Dan.
See? It's like we're not speaking the same language. I'm out.
GitLab is the only single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle, making sure your teams are all on the same page.
Do you know how to play the E string?
I can learn.
Hey, thanks very much, Charlene. Well, after Charlene, this is time of the day we go to the Analyst Corner with Mitch. Mitchell Ashley, CEO and founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. Mitchell, take it away.
Welcome to Analyst Corner. It's Friday. We're going to be talking about our Flash Poll we've been doing this week. This week, we're focusing on software delivery management. Some of the information around what kinds of things are people doing to try to measure progress. And one of the things we checked in on was, what kinds of change failure metrics do you track or do you measure? That's how we phrased the question this week. Now, our answers weren't too far off from being anything surprising. I don't know that we, have any great news to launch or to announce today, but I think it confirms two things for me. And I think why it does that is because of the top two answers. The top answer was, we don't measure any of the metrics that we asked about. Defects that are found in production, mean time between failure, between recovery, deployment failures, etc. So if we aren't measuring failures, how do we know how to fix them? I doubt we're not measuring because we're super good at it. Could happen, usually not the case. There's the expression, you are what you measure, kind of like you are what you eat, or you do what you measure, or you value what you measure. So I think that's kind of interesting, telling to me that, over a third, just a little over a third of the respondents said that, it's none of the above. And I doubt it's some other esoteric metric that's more important. Now, the second answer was build failures. Makes total sense, right? What do developers care about, right? Build didn't work, build failed, you check something in, go fix it, just stop the assembly line. One of the first places in the assembly line, the software delivery assembly line, that you'll see issues, at least one of the early first ones. So the other things kind of come in after that were defects caught in production, deployment failures, etc. But they were pretty low. Those were compared to build failures, which is 23%, much less. Now, keep in mind the way we answered this question, I'm not sure that 23% is really representative of only 23% of the people measure that. It was a combination of what are sort of your top priorities, what you're looking at, and how you measure your change failures. So all that said, let's step back for a moment and talk about metrics and why they're important. Pretty general topic. I mean, again, if you are what you measure, you value what you measure, you'll improve what you measure. This kind of goes back to the total quality management idea. Now, I learned about TQM in the 90s, and it was kind of still during the Deming days and some of the awards that went with that and the populated around that, the FIT discipline and learning organization, some of those things, which was still all are great kind of things to have in your background that still apply today. And of course, the resurgence of continuous learning or continuous improvement also harkens back to those things as well. So one of the things I would encourage us to think about of failure metrics, of change failure metrics, is what impact did they have on our customers and on the organization. So where they occurred is kind of how the typical metrics are put together: build failures, deployment failures, in production, rollbacks, meantime, etc. But what did they affect? Did it matter that we had a high or a low meantime between failure if it didn't affect something that's extremely important? Right? It's sort of, in a way, we're asking part of the right question, but not all of the right question. So I think what we need is a shift in our metrics, a shift in our measurement, to always be thinking about the end impact and the impact that it has on the value of what the business does, what it delivers to the customer, whether that's internal or external, and the impact of the experience on the customer. If service is down, the website's down, the mobile app won't talk to the back end, whatever, people can't use what you provide, that's a big deal. That's a meantime between failure I want to know about. If it's, we're going to get a delay in running this process, but it's still going to happen within the overall time frame of when we need to provide information to the customer or analytics to a department or whatever it might be. It's important, but it's not the same as something that affects the value of what we provide to really the end user, the end product, the end customer, the end entity that's paying for that value. So let's think about that as we talk about software delivery management and what are the best ways to improve it. This all falls under a category I would describe as IT measuring itself, but not measuring the value to the business, the value to the customer. And that's what we need to do around our planning, our goals, our metrics, is align those to things that make a difference to the people who write the check, the people who use the service, the people who are trying to get work done or use what we produce as part of their life, a part of their business, a part of their process. And that's why we're here, ultimately, to do that. That doesn't have to be that exact measure every time. It may be a line of sight to get there. Well, meantime between failure, well, how many of those now affect customers? How many of those affect customer in a serious way? Potentially, we're going to lose a customer because that happened. That's the kind of metrics we want to move towards. And whether you call that value stream management or software delivery management, I call it business. That's what we're here for, is to serve the customer. And the reason why we're passionate about delivering what we do, it's not just delivering software, it's delivering software that brings value to people and people in businesses and consumers. So thanks for listening for this week and following along. We had some great interviews, and also we have some really great interviews coming up next week. I hope you'll tune in again to Analyst Corner, and be sure to take our software delivery management questionnaire, our research that we have ongoing at acceleratedsurvey.com. And of course, you can schedule a 30-minute free analyst inquiry with Accelerated Strategies Analyst. You can do that by going to our homepage, our webpage, accelst.com. And when you scroll down to the team, you'll see folks on the team, and we now have the ability directly from there to go to each individual and say, I'd like to schedule time with Sanjay Sharma or Gary Groover or Bob Russellman or Mitch Ashley or Mark Hornbeek or any number of folks that we have, of course, on the team. We're all available to do that. We look forward to talking with you. Well, I hope that you've had a good week. It's certainly been another interesting one to be a part of in many ways. And as things are starting to open up, we'll see how that changes how we interact in our business and our lives and maybe with each other. So thank you for following along and being part of Analyst Corner. We look forward to doing this again with you next week. So be well, be safe, and be careful out there.
Hey everyone, Alan Schimmel, CEO, founder of Devops here. I want to personally invite you to join us on June 4th for 12 hours strong of TechStrong. TechStrong Con is our conference that we're putting together. The tech industry is so built, and it was such an integral piece of our existence and identity of going to so many conferences, communicating, collaborating, networking, seeing your friends in the industries, your peers. And, just because we can't get together in person anymore, we can certainly do it virtually. We've been doing virtual events at Devops for 2 years. We think we've got them down. It's, it's a really immersive experience. But what I'm really excited about with TechStrong is, my friend John Willis, my partner in Digital Anarchist, John's put together an amazing lineup of speakers. I think unlike any you've seen at a virtual DevOps, cloud native, DevSecOps, or cybersecurity related conference before. Check it out. Go to techstrongcon.com. Registration, attendance is free, but space is limited. We hope to see you there. It's 12 hours all day, June 4th. techstrongcon.com. Stay well, stay healthy, stay strong. TechStrong.
Hello, my name is Mark Hornbeek, and I welcome you to the second tutorial in the series Engineering DevOps. This tutorial is called the 9 Pillars of Engineering DevOps. Again, I'm Mark Hornbeek, referred to as DevOps the Gray. I am CEO and Principal Consultant of Engineering DevOps Consulting, Analyst for the Accelerated Strategies Group, Ambassador and author of the DevOps Institute, and a blogger on devops.com. I'm also the author of the book in the upper left side there called Engineering DevOps. And if you want to learn more about engineering DevOps services and information and resources, you can look at my website, engineeringdevops.com. So what's the agenda for this tutorial? What are the 9 pillars of engineering DevOps? Why are they important to engineering DevOps? And what are some of the engineering practices for each pillar? By the way, there is a white paper for each of these tutorials available on my website. You're welcome to go there and download a free copy. In this case, it's called, of course, the 9 Pillars of Engineering DevOps. So what do I mean when I say a pillar of DevOps? A pillar is a major immovable structure part of DevOps. Much like a pillar in a building that helps hold up a structure, a DevOps pillar represents something that's permanent part of every well-engineered DevOps. If you are doing DevOps properly, you're going to find each of these pillars and part of them and explicit considerations for each of them. Just a little secret, by the way, my symbol with the triple infinity sign, there are 9 pillars surrounding the infinity sign. That's just a little aside, but I find that interesting trivia. What are the 9 pillars? Well, before we get into a definition, I just want to remind you in the first tutorial, what is engineering DevOps? I pointed out that I use some Arthurian symbolism throughout my book and also use it throughout this course. The round table on the left side is uses the 9 pillars to hold up the continuous infinity symbol. The big picture on the right is Gothic or Roman building with columns or pillars, as well as some horizontal components that help represent as an aid memoir for all the things about the 9 pillars of DevOps. So the 9 pillars of DevOps is basically a prescriptive framework. It helps categorize specific engineering practices in a way that makes it clear how to engineer DevOps, how to implement DevOps. The 9 pillars are in the order on the diagram, but in no particular order of importance: leadership, collaborative culture, design for DevOps, continuous integration, continuous testing, elastic infrastructure, continuous monitoring, continuous security, and continuous delivery. Each of these will be covered briefly in this tutorial. So why are they important to DevOps? Well, having a common reference framework helps implement the DevOps and complements the engineering DevOps blueprint that was described in the first tutorial, what is engineering DevOps. The categorization into pillars helps people align their terminology and communication with each other, which hopefully will accelerate the implementations and just ease communication. It provides guidance for implementers. It's a good idea to keep in mind all 9 pillars while you're implementing DevOps in case you forget some and you fall short and your DevOps implementation disappoints. Also, assessments can be helped a lot by using the practices associated with each. This is something I do in my own consulting practice. I use each of the 9 pillars and the associated practices to evaluate the current state and desired future state of each of the pillars for an actual DevOps implementation. I should point out that other than the 9 vertical pillars, there are horizontal and horizontal structures. So along the foundation, there are orchestration and automation practices. These are common to all the vertical practices. And governance is another one at the foundation level. At the roof level, you have things like continuous delivery, CI/CD pipelines, application release automation, value stream management. All of these things are worth considering, but they're outside the scope of this tutorial. This tutorial is really concentrated on the vertical pillars. So let's talk about the pillars. The leadership pillar has to do with aptitudes, attitudes, and actions of people that have oversight or leadership roles over teams and organizations that are on a DevOps journey, implementing DevOps or improving it. There's some example practices in abbreviated format listed below, things like leadership provide a vision for the organization, some overall team direction, or DevOps in particular, stimulate the team regarding DevOps initiatives and directions, provide inspirational communication. Again, all this is relative to DevOps. Encourage people to understand that change is required and it brings opportunities. It's not a bad thing. Demonstrate and encourage empathy, because DevOps is all about, as we'll see in the next slide, cross-functional teams working together, and empathy is a big part of making that work. And leadership should encourage that. And generally put in place personal recognition systems and be very active in helping teams move in the right direction. These are leadership practices. The culture practice, collaborative culture, has to do with the way teams behave and their organizational structure and culture within the teams. So for DevOps, cross-functional collaboration across DevOps, tools, security, and various QA and various other departments, if you like, is encouraged and responsibilities are shared, whether these roles are in different parts of an organization or integrated together in teams. Cross-functional collaboration is encouraged. Generally avoid building silos and help break down silos between those teams. Encourage learning from failures and cooperation rather than focus on blame. Make sure that communication is flowing fluidly across the cross-functional team, typically through a choice of common communication tools and general policies and culture. Being sure that the DevOps system itself is not just dictated, but it's formulated by a cross-functional team, so there's alignment and buy-in, and even the changes to that system get similar buy-in from a cross-functional team. Make sure that there's a process used to change the DevOps itself, if you like DevOps for DevOps, and have KPIs and monitoring and metrics to make sure that the end DevOps system is not only working, but that the way it's working is visible to everybody. Okay, pillar 3, design for DevOps, has to do with how application software is designed. So really this is talking about the application that's going through the DevOps pipeline and all their changes. In general, modular designs are favored over large legacy monoliths. Why? Because you want to be able to have just small portions of the system packaged and integrated and tested and even released where possible. That's why in more advanced environments, immutable microservice structures, deployed in the cloud or 12-factor app, tenants are favored. Changes that are going through the development phase are checked carefully, typically with static analysis tools, pair code reviews, functional testing, and even dynamic testing prior to integration in a well-engineered DevOps environment. You don't wait till after integration. These are actually requirements for integration. Software switches like feature flags or toggles, whatever you want to call them, enable selective feature level testing, promotions, and reverse, not only at the beginning, but all the way through, even through deployment to help with selective testing. Automated test cases are checked into the integration branch at the same time that the code changes are checked in. So to make sure that you have tests that are available along with the code, and that they're available and tested in an environment that is similar to a production environment as much as possible, so you don't have problems creeping in later. Require you to go back and revisit that like the old waterfall model used to do. Developers commit their code changes to trunk or the integration branch at least once per day. So these are just examples of design for DevOps pillar practices. Continuous integration, pillar 4. So continuous integration has to do with changes to software code and build artifacts that are compiled, assembled, and otherwise packaged into executable artifacts for the application release. Software version management systems are used throughout to manage source code, artifact repository systems for code changes. Software version management is also applied to the pipeline tools and infrastructure configurations and tests as well. Single trunk or integration branches of the code are favored over having multiple trunk branches for each application or at each microservice or component. Release branches are started off typically to support a release update. Commits are triggered automatically to do the merges, the builds, and verification tests of any build. Resources for the builds and the tests associated with them, for that matter, are available on demand and never block build. This talks to the elastic infrastructure aspect of the infrastructure. Incremental builds are completed in less than an hour, typically in a well-engineered DevOps environment. Okay, my favorite pillar is continuous testing. It has to do with how tests are used to assess software code. The word assessment I tend to use rather than testing often because I think it's a more generic point for continuous quality. So testing the code and all the artifacts associated with that code that are built, make sure they meet requirements before they're deemed ready for release. So in this case, continuous testing starts at development with a lot of pre-flight testing prior to integration. It includes unit testing, functional regression testing, which are created and integrated into the trunk branch at the same time the code is. Release regression tests are automated, as typically 85% or better is a good ballpark milestone. are a goal. Release performance tests are also included, just to verify that no degradations are included, and these are very important to automate. It's hard to get precision and accuracy on performance variations unless you have a solid, well-controlled performance test environment. Tests are automatically orchestrated. In other words, the environment for testing is set up and released according to the requirements of a particular change. Deployment methods are controlled. So green, blue deployment methods, which are described in a later tutorial, verify deployments in a staging environment prior to activating the new environment to a live production. And even post-deployment A/B testing, feature flag rollouts, canary testing rollouts, and other methods can be used to trial new versions of the code and even test new versions of the code after they're deployed in a controlled way so that they're not going to be undue risk. Elastic infrastructure is a very important pillar. Everything depends on the infrastructure, of course. The pillar has to do with how machines, storage, networks, or computing, building, testing vary in near real time depending on the workload. So that's the elastic aspects of the infrastructure. Different changes will require a varying amount of infrastructure to support the builds and the testing for that. This scope includes data as well as files, making sure that those are all archived, not only for the builds and the software, but also for the tests and the infrastructure also. Making sure that older versions of those things can be retrieved and reinstated on demand if there's a problem. That speaks to the focus on mean time to restore service, which is even more important than mean time between failures in a well-engineered DevOps environment. You can recover very quickly. Automatically handle exceptions gracefully, so that speaks to how the system is designed to be somewhat fault tolerant. The reasons for failures are analyzed, rescheduled if possible. System configurations are stored and maintained as much as the code itself. Idempotent configuration management processes and methods are used. In other words, if you configure a system today, if you go to reconfigure it tomorrow, you're going to get the same configuration result. It's not dependent on the environment or something. Similarly, immutable infrastructure deployments are favored. So things like containers where the entire stack of and environment variables are saved, and you have high level of confidence if you were to test a component in one deployment environment, will work the same in another one because the containers contain everything you need that will ensure consistency. User experience should be consistent for all users, no matter where those users are geographically or organizationally. Fault recovery is automated and consistently verified as well. Infrastructure failure modes are tested on an ongoing basis using principles and tools such as chaos engineering. And finally, disaster recovery is automated and periodically tested as well. So those are, again, some examples of elastic infrastructure practices to help understand what I mean by that. Pillar 7, we're getting down the list here. So continuous monitoring has to do with instrumenting, collecting, and analyzing data needed to manage the health and performance of applications, databases, pipelines, and infrastructure in order to engineer improvements. This pillar is particularly important when you get to the second way continuous feedback level of DevOps. After you have a basic continuous flow, then feedback and instrumentation with metrics is extremely important as a prelude to the third way of continuous improvement. So here are some example practices. Deployment metrics and release metrics are used for gating promotions between stages of a pipeline. So you have thresholds of these metrics that tell you whether you're passing or failing, or whether the code is sufficiently ready to promote through the pipeline. Metrics such as test completion rates, test pass rates, critical bugs that need to be mitigated. Those are examples of such great metrics and criteria. In general, logging and proactive alert systems need to be organized. You can have a lot of different systems involved. How do you make sense out of those if they're not organized, resolved to some common resolution point and distributed according to which stakeholder needs to address them. In general, metrics and KPI snapshots as well as trends are visible to all the stakeholders, not to just a few. If somebody wants to see, on the ops side how the dev builds are doing, they can see that, and vice versa. Developers want to see how their features are working in the operations environment, they can see that. In general, infrastructure metrics also include availability. That's really important because of the mean time to restore concept of DevOps. Process analytics. This is more of an advanced example of a practice, but they're helping to determine improvements for the DevOps processes themselves. In general, once you get to the third way of DevOps, continuous improvement, then you start looking at things like predictive analytics to dynamically adjust the DevOps pipeline configuration itself and optimize it further. Okay, pillar 8, in no particular order, but the continuous security pillar is part of what is often referred to as DevSecOps or rugged DevOps. I just lump all that together as continuous security. It has to do with practices for integrating security for applications and databases and pipelines and infrastructure. So basically all things DevOps into the continuous delivery pipeline itself. In this case, developers are trained and they are responsible for security of what they're doing. They work collaboratively with security teams, but basically they take responsibility. Security assurance is automated as much as possible, and there are practices for monitoring security events and security vulnerabilities and priorities. The security platforms offer APIs, in other words, the tools that are used for testing security have application program interfaces to automate the integration of those tools into the pipeline. Software version management practices are used for software and scripts and templates and blueprints. Immutable infrastructures are preferred for security because basically are locking down the environment, not changing it after you test it the first time. Security controls are automated so they don't impede the agility, so you don't have some big wait point where people are checking for security. Tools are integrated into the pipeline, and source code is only accessible by trusted users and credentials using different methods. These are, again, just some examples of continuous security practices to help you understand what it is. Finally, continuous deliveries, CD. The continuous delivery pillar refers to practices for preparing release artifacts for deployment. I do distinguish deployment and delivery, but I lump them under the same pillar. So delivery and deployment stages are separate. Stages are separate, but the best practices are covered under this one pillar. The deliverables, the pass metrics are packaged for deployment, and deliverable packages include the data, not only the code, to validate each deployment. And deployment decisions are done in accordance with some predefined metrics. As much as possible, they're codified as release policies as code. Deployment is pushed to delivery, pushed to once delivery metrics are achieved. Failed deployments are detected early and actioned quickly. Automated recovery and self-healing capabilities are in place to make sure that deployments are handled quickly and with high level integrity and availability. So there we go. We have now explained what are the 9 pillars of engineering DevOps. And just as a recap, the 9 pillars is a prescriptive framework that I use in my book, Engineering DevOps. It categorizes specific engineering practices in a way that makes it very clear that, how to engineer DevOps in a successful DevOps implementation. To recap again, the 9 pillars are leadership, collaborative culture, design for DevOps, continuous integration, continuous testing, elastic infrastructure, continuous monitoring, continuous security, and continuous delivery. So that's the tutorial for today. And I encourage you, if you want to learn more, you can contact me at mhornbeek@engineeringdevops.com or on my LinkedIn address there, or on my webpage, engineeringdevops.com. You can download a free copy of the associated white paper in the documents page of my website, or get a copy of my book from mybook.to/engineeringdevops. Thank you again for your attention, and I hope you found this tutorial useful. Look forward to the next one. Thank you.
Right now, software is more important than ever. It is powering the online services enabling teams to connect, collaborate, and work remotely, and allowing innovation to continue to get to market rapidly. CloudBees offers software delivery automation solutions to support all remote teams, and you can use the best-in-class tools you need to get the job done. CloudBees helps you build stuff that matters. Visit cloudbees.com to learn more.
Okay, so we've moved the working from home fitness towards the end of our show today, figuring you get that out of the way. Maybe now you have time to put on your sneakers, put aside the work, and spend a couple minutes exercising your body. We're really lucky to have Jeremy on our team here, and he's kind enough to come in and tape these or record these working from home fitness videos. Here's the latest from Jeremy. So enjoy, get healthy.
Hey guys, Jeremy here with Media Ops, back for another workout from the home video. So this is another video. If you're interested in seeing some of the previous workouts that we've done, you could go back and check those out on TechStrong TV. You could also find them on Roku, Amazon Fire, as well as Apple TV. So what we're doing with this series is we're taking items that you can find in basically every household. And with everybody sheltering at home, most non-essential people sheltering at home, self-quarantining, this is a way to stay active, get the body moving, as most of us are working from home. And so we're gonna get started today, first of all, with a warm-up. So with our warm-up, we're gonna go 20 to 30 seconds on each of these warm-up exercises. We'll go into lunges, quad stretches, arm circles, alternating toe touches, and squat with rotation, because we want to make sure we're nice and warm before we're doing any more physical activities. So let's start it out with our warm-up. Okay guys, we're going to start out first with our alternating lunges. So we're going to take a nice wide step and drop that back knee down. So we're going to go alternating with our lunges. Nice wide steps. Good, we're going to warm up those legs. Get those hamstrings, glutes, as well as your quads, all fired up. Get ready to do some work. Start out nice and slow, get deep into that stretch. Again, if you can't drop that back knee down quite as far, that's okay. Take it down. For your range of motions, everybody's gonna be a little bit different. I'll go one more on each side, finish it off. Good, and now we're gonna bring it up into a quad stretch. We're gonna grab our left foot, pull it up. Now, of course, if you don't have the balance to stand straight, you can always grab a wall, grab a chair, help balance yourself out a little bit. Good, we're gonna hold each one for about 7 to 10 seconds. Good, work on our balance a little bit as well. Good, nice static stretch here. Good, and release. Next up, we're gonna do our arm circles. So arms gonna be out. We're gonna start out with small arm circles, moving forward. We're gonna go 5 to 7 here, then we're gonna go reverse. Good. Now we're gonna go back forward, but this time we're gonna go bigger arm circles. Nice and wide, loosen up those shoulders. We'll go one more, and then we'll reverse it. Big arm circles to the back. Good, let's go 2 more. Last one. Good, and then we're gonna go feet wider than shoulder width apart. For alternating toe touches, we're gonna extend our arms, come, rotate over, clear those hips out of the way, reach over, try to touch the opposite toe. Again, if you can't quite make it down all the way, go down as far as you can. And of course, I'm gonna try to reach a little bit further each time as I get a little bit looser. Try to extend and reach a little bit further, get a little bit deeper into that stretch. Keeping my legs nice and straight. So get a good hamstring stretch as I turn and rotate. Good. We're going to finish it off with our squats into rotation. So as always with our squats, we want to keep the weight back on our heels, pushing our hips back, taking it down just like you're going into sit into a chair. So we're going to squat, come up, and rotate. Squat and rotate. Good. Get that back nice and loose. Especially going to feel this right along your shoulder blade here. Get a good stretch. Good. We'll go one more each side. Good. All right, guys, now that we're warmed up, let's jump into the workout. Okay, guys, so for today's workout, for those of you that have been following, have seen the previous episodes, this is going to look a little bit familiar. So what we're going to do today is a hybrid workout. So we're going to go 3 to 4 rounds, 10, 12 to 15 reps. So for my beginners, we're going to be doing 12 for 10 for my beginners, 12 for my intermediate, and then 15 for my more advanced. So we're going to bring back our backpack, our water jugs, and our chair from previous episodes. So what we're going to do is we've got 3 supersets, right? One, we have 2 exercises with the backpack, 2 with the jug, and then 2 with the chairs. So we're going to do each superset 3 to 4 times before we move on to the next superset. So for example, with my backpack, I'm going to do my 1-arm row into my squat, back to my 1-arm row, squat, repeat 3 to 4 rounds. So let's get into it. All right, guys, for our first superset, we're going to load our backpack up. You can put books and really anything of weight into the backpack. All right, we're going to take a nice solid surface like a table and do our 1-arm rows. Okay, we're going to go 10, 12, or 15 on each side. Good. Keep that elbow nice and tight. As you see, I'm trying to get that elbow past my back, get full extension. Nice and slow. Don't let it drop. You want to maintain control the entire time. Good. Got one more on this side. Good. Now I'm going to move it over to the other side. I'm going to stagger back. Now notice the side that I'm rowing on, that's the foot that's back, that I've cleared out of the way. So now I'm going to work on the other side. Again, keep that elbow nice and tight to the body. Slow and controlled. I'm going to work that upper back. Good, we'll go 2 more. And good. Now we're going to move it right into our squats. So we're going to load that weight up onto our back and take it down into our squats. Good. Try to touch those elbows with your knees. Make sure you're getting down as far as you can. Again, if you can't quite make it down that far, that's fine. Good. Now with the weight on your back, you don't want it to lean too far forward or have you pull back. So you have to tighten up that core. Good. We've got 2 more to go here. Last one. And good. And because this is a superset, we're going to do 3 to 4 rounds. I'm going to go right back into my 1-arm rows because what we're doing is called active rest. So we're going to work our upper body, work our back with the rows. Then we can move right into our squats, pretty much back into our rows because while I'm working my lower body, my upper body is resting. Okay, let's move it on to the water jugs. All right, guys, we're going to go with our curls. Grab those water jugs. This is essentially what's called a hammer curl. So your palms are facing each other. Good. Those elbows are nice and tight to the body. I don't want to see any swinging. Don't want to use momentum. I'm also not letting these pull me down. I'm going to control them the entire way. Good. Got 2 more. Good. I'm going to work my shoulders by doing my lateral raises. Bring them out to the side. Let me turn this way so you guys can see. So when I come up, I want my hand slightly in front of my elbow slightly in front of my shoulder. That way I'm in good position. Not gonna hurt my shoulder doing these. Again, nice and slow. Make sure it's controlled. Good, 2 more. And last one. Good. So again, I'm going to superset the curls with the lateral raises, go 3 to 4 rounds there. Moving on to my chair, I'm going to start it out with my dips. So again, sit to the front of the chair, all right, your hands down by your hips. What I'm going to do, step my feet out. Now I'm carrying all my weight, you know, in my arms. So slowly lower and extend. Working the tricep, just basically the back of your arm. Good. Try to get as low as you can on that. Good. We'll go 2 more. Good. Bring yourself back onto the chair. Shake our arm out, get a little bit of blood flow going, and we're gonna go right into our push-ups. So with my push-ups, I wanna make sure my hands are about chest high. So when I come down, I wanna be mid-chest here. So slowly lower and extend. Good, got 2 more. And good. I'm gonna go right back into my dips. Again, guys, 3 to 4 rounds for each of these supersets. If you wanna take a minute or 2, rest and recover in between each one. A couple episodes ago, I also came up with a strictly core. So once you finish that, that would be an excellent finisher. So you're working multiple muscle groups here, back, legs, bicep, shoulder, tricep, and chest. You can finish it off with that core. All right, guys, if you have any questions, you can always email me, Jeremy, that's Jeremy, @devops.com. Love to hear your feedback, any suggestions for future videos, any feedback that you have. All right, guys, hope you're staying safe. I'll see you soon.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
That is going to put a wrap on episode 35 for today, May 15th. Hey, I hope you have a great weekend. If things are opening up near where you are, get out, enjoy some fresh air. But you know what? Still practice social distancing. Do what you need to do to stay healthy. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. So stay healthy, stay well, stay strong, stay tech strong. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll see you on Monday.